Many suffering brands don't have a marketing problem. They actually have a team problem. You can't build a clear brand if your team is operating in confusion. Too many founders skip straight to the customer story without first aligning the team. Patrick Lencioni, founder of the Table Group and author of 13 best-selling books, has spent decades inside the rooms where real brand momentum begins. Pat and his team at the Table Group have discovered that dysfunctional teams are the silent killers of creative potential, and how the most powerful branding move you can make is building a culture where truth is safe, genius is understood, and clarity flows from the inside out. This is Anatomy of a Brand, where we obsess over what makes a brand tick so yours never settles. This is episode 14 with the Table Group founder, Patrick Lencioni. Listen, this episode is probably a dream episode for me. I don't know. I couldn't have imagined sitting at a table with you right now, Pat. This was like, for me, I'm sitting meeting a hero. So this is a big deal for me. It may be just another podcast for you, but for me, it's a huge deal.
Well, I would lie if I didn't tell you that this isn't uncomfortable having somebody tell you that.
I love it.
Can you imagine if I said, oh yeah, I can just imagine. I probably am a hero to you. What's that like? How are you feeling right now?
Please tell me how much I've improved your life.
I mean, when your wife is clipping your nose hairs before you come over, it's hard to feel like anybody's hero. So
that's perfect.
I'm so glad to be here.
Oh my gosh. I've read your work for so long. I've hired people based off of your work. I've built teams based off of your work. I've used it in countless organizational moments for me in my past and currently. So I know that there's countless leaders around the world that owe a lot of their success to you. And I'm here to just make you feel great. That's what the team said. Hey, we need to figure out how to puff up Pat. So let's get Chris in the room with him just to make him feel great. But I want to ask you a personal question here as we start. How do you feel about the work you've done so far? Like, you've been at this for a really long time and you've created some of the pinnacle moments of organizational health and leadership among some of the greats. How do you feel about the work you've done so far?
You know, I think there's two things. One, I don't slow down a lot to think about that. And I think there's some virtue and some vice in that.
Okay.
The virtue is I know I'm not important. I mean, God gave me insights and a passion for something. I get to use it and help people. That is good. I should acknowledge that. Sometimes it's hard for me to do that. I feel uncomfortable. And I think that has to do with, wound issues. And so I just kind of go, well, what's next? But I'm starting to learn to slow down a little bit more and listen when people say that it's made a difference for them. And
when you slow down to notice it, what tends to be the response you have? Like, do you feel anything that you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting to feel that when?
Absolutely. I remember years ago when we started our business, 28 years ago, and we just thought, hey, if we just get to be consultants to local businesses and pay our bills, that'll be great. And then I wrote a book for fun, and we said, if somebody actually prints this so we can give it to people, that would be great. And then somebody said, will you give a speech? And we were like, oh my gosh, if people will actually let us market our consulting by giving speeches, that would be great. Every step of the way, we thought, if this is all it is, this will be great. And people responded to our stuff, books, speaking, the assessments we did, the consulting, of course, and it just kept going. So every step of the way, we thought, though, this would be enough.
Wow.
We never thought, oh my gosh, this won't be great until we get to there. Huh. We just kept following our nose, and by the grace of God, we're here. And I look back and I'm like, it's a surprise.
Wow. That's for me, it's really refreshing to hear, because sometimes you can hear people say, oh, we've thought about it this whole time. We've been dreaming this big dream. And every step of the way, you guys are learning it.
The only thing we thought when we first started, I mean, I think I remember before the company started, me and the people that started it got together. And one of the things we said during our meetings was, we'd like to have the best little consulting firm in the world. What we meant by that is not that we would be famous, but that we were doing something that really made a difference. And we thought, and if we could contribute to changing the world of work, that would be amazing.
Gosh.
But we never really looked at the end result of that. We said, let's just do this part, and that'll be enough.
Wow. I love that so much. And so with what we're doing here with Anatomy of a Brand, we're looking at holistically at brands. We look at all the elements that make up a brand. We're looking at the visuals, we're looking at the marketing, we're looking at the sales, we're looking at the stories they're telling, the content they're creating. And we're interacting with a lot of founders and even creatives. And one of the things I've noticed in these kinds of spaces is the lack of leadership development or the lack of kind of organizational health, them thinking not just on the products that they make or the services that they offer the world, but going, what is it like to actually run an organization at a high level and how to be healthy? It's often overlooked. And their leadership skills usually don't match the level of creativity that they have. They're exceptionally creative, but they haven't spent the time to go, I'm going to learn this discipline of leadership and how to run a team, how to lead.
Yeah.
I know organizations that were hunting for VPs of creative for almost a year because they couldn't find somebody who had creative skills and leadership skills together. And so that's why I'm loving this episode so much, because it's in our space, in our industry. It's something that's overlooked. It's not the thing that they dive in. It's often not even the sexiest thing. They're thinking, how am I going to grow my company? How am I going to grow my business? How do I be the most creative? Not how do I run a team well? How do I lead my organization well? What's the signs of health? So I'm really excited to dive into that.
And you know what's interesting about that? I mean, I love branding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fat. And I remember when we started the company, we did branding games like or exercises where we said, okay, if the table group early, and it's changed over time, our brand has morphed. But I remember when we first started going, if we're a car, what kind of car are we? And you know, that's one of those.
I love that.
And we're like, and we started out, we were a Honda. It was reliable. It wasn't out of people's reach. It was accessible, you know. And then, and as the years went by, things changed. We would always go, let's go back to that. What kind of car are we? And then what's our brand and what are we trying to evoke? But here's what I love about it. It's completely connected to the leadership stuff.
Yes.
And people don't understand that. And we started talking about something years ago called your mirror brand. So what's the brand you see when you look in the mirror?
Yes.
And if there's a gap between that and what you're trying to project, you're not going to be effective.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And so when we go meet with executive teams, one of the things we do is we start talking to them about their, like, why do they exist and their core values. And right away we're like, I don't want a marketing slogan.
Wow.
I want it to be what's true, but
not what's aspirational.
Right. And not something that's dressed up.
Yes.
It's like, I don't care about the words, because right away we go like, why does your company exist? And they kind of wordsmith something to put on a plaque or on a t-shirt. And I'm like, no.
Done by a committee, and it looks like it's horrible.
And what I say is this, we're not branding right now, but your brand will come from this.
Wow.
So it's about truth and authenticity. And so when we're talking about leadership and culture and building a healthy organization, the brand flows out of that and they have to be aligned.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You're hitting exactly what is even the thesis we have on looking at brands holistically, even trying to get the phrase holistic branding to be kind of this new thought. We're going, it's not just these things, but you have to look at the whole picture. All right. So organizational health, let's start there. Then we'll dive into some healthy leadership stuff and then some individual wholeness. You've got so many bestsellers. It's insane. Like it's incredible. Like from all the way from the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which people who are hearing this podcast or watching this for the first time, what you need to do is just open Amazon and just put your name in there and get every book to get your team and your organization healthy. But we're going to start with this. So we'll start with the table group, and I want you to describe the work you do at the table group, and then we'll dive into some organizational health stuff. So what is the work that you do at the table group?
Well, let me start with what we started with.
Okay.
Because I think it still emanates from that, but what I do today is very different. But we started by going to companies and helping them become healthy, which means this. So I started my career at Bain & Company, a management consulting firm. And essentially what we were there is to help companies be smarter. Like analysis, data, strategy, finance, technology, stuff that is very interesting. No doubt marketing is a big part of that.
Yeah.
But what I realized when I was there, I went to a client. I was the youngest guy on the team. And I was like, they're paying us all this money to help them get smarter, but they're not really using it. In fact, this department we're helping doesn't even like that department over there.
Yeah.
They're competing against each other. We're wasting their money if we're not teaching them how to actually use this. And I remember saying to the people on my team, like, why don't we help them with the politics in the organization? And they said, they don't pay us to do that. And that's the day I remember thinking, I want to do that.
Wow.
And then when we started my firm a few years later, I thought it's about smart and healthy. If you're an unhealthy, dysfunctional organization, all the intelligence in the world isn't going to amount to anything because you're not going to know how to tap into it.
Wow.
And the world, and I cut my teeth in the Silicon Valley. Do you know how many brilliant companies never made it because they were so dysfunctional? And so what we did is we would go into these CEOs and we go, we know you have great ideas, but what about politics and confusion and turnover and morale? And they would always say, it's killing us, but we don't know how to fix that. Let's go fix this other stuff. And we said, we can help you with a practical, non-touchy-feely solution to the political, dysfunctional problems. We can make you healthier, and that is the multiplier of your intelligence. So if you're 100 out of 100 on intelligence, but you're super dysfunctional, you're not using any of it. If you're 50 in intelligence, but you're healthy, you're using every bit of it. And the healthy organizations win. Wow. And over the years, we found it was always that.
So when you said something there, I'm just having just a geek moment here. Just listening to everything you're saying is so fun for me. You said something I've wanted to ask you for a long time. There's lots of stuff in here that I've wanted to ask you that I'm like, oh my gosh, I am going to get to ask Pat some questions. You say we don't want this fluffy answer. Were you seeing something or sensing something that people had a resistance to the work you were doing because they were labeling it as fluffy or soft feely? What was the thing that you were feeling and getting resistance from that made you feel like you had to articulate that?
Well, so I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live now in Nashville, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of consultants there doing what I would consider touchy-feely work.
Okay.
And
dive into that. Tell me what that means.
Oh, they're like, let's go catch each other falling out of a tree, or hold hands, or I used to say smoke pot and get naked. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so I knew what these CEOs were thinking. They were bringing in consultants to help them with their teams, and they were doing this weird stuff. Wow. And I knew it was weird. They did too. And so when I went and visited with CEOs, I knew that if all I said to them is, that touchy-feely stuff, it's stupid. I don't want to do it. I worked at Bain. I want to help you use the intelligence you have, but you've got to be better behaviorally. So we're going to talk about behavior, emotions, values, treatment of each other. But I promise you this. I used to, from the very beginning, my sales pitch was, it will never be slow. It will never be boring. And it will lead to real results. And at the end of it, your staff will say, that was the best day we ever spent. And we were so confident because there were so many people doing it badly that if we could come in and position ourselves against that, it would make all the difference. And every CEO, I could just see it on their face when I said, we're not going to do touchy-feely stuff because I hate it too. And they would go, oh, I'm so glad you said that. Then they'd start listening.
Wow.
Wow.
And I love that so much. Yeah. Just calling out that thing. They're like, you think it's this, but it's not that. Right. Let's just dive in. So in your view, what's the single greatest misconception leaders have about organizational health? And how does it show up in behavior? Like if you're like, this is the misconception they have, and this is showing up like this.
Yeah, I think leaders often have the misconception that because organizational health is not easily measurable on a spreadsheet, that it doesn't have a material impact on the business. And I learned early on that people would say, what's the ROI of doing this? And it's like, I can't calculate it for you. I could make up some numbers that would be disingenuous. It's going to impact every element of your business. And if you need to know the ROI so you can prove to the CFO that this little bit of money you're going to spend on this is going to pay off, you're probably not understanding it. It infuses itself in everything.
Wow. Oh, I feel like we could camp out there. So when they're looking for that ROI, what do you think when they start to dive into that and they go, okay, I'm willing to look at this differently. What's the first thing you're going to with them? Like when they're going, okay, I'm willing to suspend my suspicions here. Where are you going first? Like, what are you thinking first? Like, what's your initial go-to there?
So if it's when I'm working with the team, the first thing we go to is the interdynamics of the team. But I don't stay there for very long.
Okay.
Because I know that they're coming there and they want to get into strategy and brand and priorities and all that stuff. But what I say to them is, if we don't make you behaviorally cohesive, you're not going to have effective conversations about strategy and brand and all those other things. So the first thing we do is we get them to know each other at a different level. We literally spend 15 minutes getting them to be just slightly vulnerable with each other about who they are. I mean, just barely.
Yeah.
And in 15 minutes, they're looking at each other going, I never knew that about you. Oh, you and I have a lot in common. Or I really admire you. I had no idea you've gone through that. Suddenly, it doesn't matter what your title is, what your age is, what anything else is. They have a different understanding. And then we'll profile them using Working Genius or
which I can't wait to dive into.
Yeah. And then they're looking at each other going, oh my gosh, no wonder you're good at that. Hey, you really do suck at that, don't you? And they're like, I do. And they're saying things to one another within an hour.
Yeah.
They're actually laughing and telling each other more direct, difficult things because they have permission to, because it's right there.
Wow. What's happening there? I'm assuming this is kind of the place where 5 dysfunctions of a team and that kind of stuff comes from.
Yep.
What do you actually do? What's the goal you're trying to get at when under that, where you're like, all right, 15 minutes, because you have the initial statement of, we're not gonna do this fluffy stuff, but I'm gonna introduce the word vulnerability to you, but we're not doing this fluffy stuff. How did you, what's the deal there? Because that almost feels counter to what you're saying.
And that's why I'm constantly saying to them, I mean, tomorrow, if I do one of these, I did one yesterday with the team, I will say to them, I'm going to take you through a few exercises right now. And I told you it's not touchy-feely, and it's not. It's going to impact the way we make decisions later. Mm-hmm. So just calling it out, a guy named Terry Pierce, who passed on years ago, wrote a book called Leading Out Loud. And he said, you always have to anticipate people's objections. And so I just do that all the time. I'm like, you're probably thinking that this is weird. It's not, I promise. And we're going to get through it quickly so we can start talking about these other things.
Wow.
So I don't want them thinking, sitting there wondering.
Yeah.
I want them to know I know what they're thinking and I'm right with them.
Yeah, because you're diving into the foundation of the absence of conflict, no trust happening there, artificial harmony. We're moving up that pyramid so speak to that process when we're going, all right, there's no trust here. Now we got some artificial harmony. People are doing what? Like what is artificial harmony?
Artificial harmony is just when people try to pretend they get along, even though there's all these underlying issues. And it's terrible because what it does is it prevents you from going and having the conversations you need. And artificial harmony is so prevalent in our society today. Ironically, people will say terrible things on the internet about each other, or go to a meeting or go to a rally outside and scream mean things and do terrible things. But then they won't sit across the table from somebody and say, I disagree with you. In fact, it's frustrating. And I want to talk to you about this because this is not good. So what we know is that people are never going to have that conversation if they don't trust each other. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we do with our clients is we get them to build trust. And trust is about vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how you can get somebody to reveal something about themselves, not the deepest, darkest secret, but
that's
something.
what I'm wondering, right? You're not like, sometimes you see even the work of Brené Brown and others, that sometimes that vulnerability is like, whoa, can we go that? Are we going there? Sometimes it feels right, and other times it doesn't feel right.
We take steps. It needs to be gradual.
Okay.
And so literally, here's the first exercise we do. We actually named it because we need to name it. It's called the personal histories exercise.
Okay.
I'll literally go around the table and say to the people at the table, and I always pre-apologize, like, this isn't soft. Where'd you grow up? How many kids were in your family? What was the hardest thing in your childhood? Go.
Wow.
And they go around the table, and it takes, and literally I'll say, everybody has 30 seconds. So you don't have to go. We're not going deep.
Yeah.
They'll go around the table and say something. One person was like, I was really heavy as a kid, or my dad died when I was young, or,
Wow.
we had alcoholism in our family. And they don't go super deep, but just that first step, people are like, hey, actually we can reveal something about ourselves. And every one of them feels relieved. Mm-hmm. There's like a liberation of like, we're human. Mm-hmm. And you're my boss, but man, you went through something hard. I never knew that. Mm-hmm. And every time they do it, I say, okay, just raise your hand if you learned something new about the people around the table. Every time. And they'll be like, how did I not know that? I've known you for 12 years. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I don't know. I didn't know if it was appropriate.
Gosh. Okay. So now, you have that base foundation of the pyramid, which is that trust.
Yes.
And you're getting through
15 minutes.
Yeah.
It goes like this.
Yeah. You're going, and then you're there to, what is the outcome outside of avoidance of conflict? What are you actually wanting them to do? Are you wanting them to just go around telling each other, I don't like this about you? Like, is that the goal? Like to constantly be telling people, I've been so looking forward to telling you the feedback that I've been holding in for so long, because now we got some trust and I'm ready to let you have it.
Not yet. Well, okay, I'm going to jump to the end of so we'll do a day and a half or 2 days initial offsite with teams. And at the end, we do an exercise that we would never have them do at the beginning. So I'm going to jump to the end. You know what the goal of this is? At the end of 2 days, I'll say, everybody take out a piece of paper and write down one thing about everybody else at the table other than yourself that they do. The main thing they do that makes this team really strong.
Yeah.
So what is the chief, and I don't mean a technical skill, like you're in charge of accounting and you're good at accounting. I mean, like, what's the characteristic that they bring to this team that's great? And everybody's glad to do that. And then I go, okay, now write down the one thing they do. Just the one thing that hurts the team sometimes. And now they're like, but because it's at the end of a 2-day offsite or one, they've built up trust along the way, and now they're ready to do it. And let me tell you, this is the most beautiful part of doing what we do. And they'll write it all down, and I'll say, okay, go to the leader first. You guys tell the leader what he or she does.
You start really with the leader.
Good. Yeah. But they start by going, what's the biggest thing they do? This is the only time there's tears, because somebody will go, wow, you guys, so you see that in me. And they're like, oh yeah, you do this all the time for us. And they're like, that's great to hear. And it's almost always consistent and real. And the leader is now like, wow, so you do appreciate the thing I care about. And they're like, oh yeah, you're great at it. Now, okay, let's go the other way. What's the thing they need to do better? And they will look at them and say, hey, when in meetings, when you cut us off and you do this, that's hard for me. And because they've just told him something great, the leaders are always like, yeah, I know I do that. And then at the end of it, they're sitting there and I'll say to the leader, so what do you think? And they're like, this is great. And the people in the room are like, we just told him or her things that we've never said, but we led up to that moment. So it doesn't take years. It takes a day and a half and we just say the one thing and then everybody else goes. Because if the leader doesn't, and in almost 30 years with 50 consultants around the world, I've only heard, I think, one story where a leader was just like, I can't believe you said that about one. We've done this thousands of times. And usually the leader is like, I love the fact that you guys just told me that.
So, okay, this is fantastic. My question here is, what is happening inside of a leader that's resistant to this whole process? When somebody brings it up and they're like, we should do this. I've seen it. I've heard about it. I listened to that podcast, Anatomy of a Brand. Pat Lencioni talked about the 5 dysfunctions of a team and this exercise. What is happening in that leader that's like, they're listening to this, they're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, nobody's kind of asked that question in that way. And I love this because I think what's happening is we are all insecure. I mean, we're human beings.
Yeah.
Flawed human nature, human beings. And every leader, what I've come to realize, is just a kid who's older. And just because they're the CEO doesn't mean they're not like the same person they were as a kid. And so vulnerability is what's necessary, but it's so easy if you're a leader. People have told you, don't let them see you sweat. You got to be on. And it's such bad advice. Because when you're a leader, what gains you credibility is actually being the first one to say, yeah, I'm not good at this, or I made a mistake, or I'm sorry, or you're smarter than I am at that. You're better. Teach me how to be like you. A leader that can actually make themselves secondary and do those things does two things. It proves to the people in the room that they're secure enough to be vulnerable. Two, it gives them permission to do it too. If a leader can't be vulnerable first, the other people on the team won't and probably shouldn't.
Yeah. I remember when I first started learning your stuff and I started diving into these questions about myself. Why was I not doing this? Why couldn't I do that? And I remember thinking, if I'm not the most qualified, then I can't lead. And I had to break down this thing, this insecurity that said, I have to be the most skilled. And if I'm not the most skilled and I admit that I'm not the most skilled, will they still follow me?
Yeah.
And will I still be able to lead? Or will someone else's skill eventually become a threat to my leadership and threat to who I am? And all the team underneath me was always going to be less skilled than me. So it just kept getting worse and worse instead of building up around me champions who are better at so many things because I was willing to look at my own faults. Right. So your work did that for me even.
Yeah, and it goes from thinking that's a weakness, it's a strength. I mean, for somebody to say, oh, here's my head of marketing. She's way better than I'm not good at this. And she's great at it. I'm learning from her every day. That will do more for your credibility, for her confidence, and for other people's perception that you have a great team. Wow. But when a leader, because of human nature, actually acts like they know more about everything than everybody else around them, people are like, this is a problem. Yeah. And everybody feels it. Now, here's the thing, though. That's not to say that competence doesn't matter. And what I've come to realize, I was just thinking about this yesterday, that every CEO is actually a CXO. They're the best at something. And it's usually like, as they came up, like, I am the most creative, or I am the most financially minded or strategic. So what I say is, you're the CEO, but now I want to hear you're also the chief what officer. So it's like, I'm the chief. Yesterday I was with the team, and the guy who's the CEO is actually the chief creativity officer. Not good at strategy, not good at marketing, not good at operations. That's okay. So that's his lane. Now celebrate everybody else who's better in their lanes.
So this is fantastic. It's so good. I'm like, I want to go for hours here, but I have to keep myself moving because I want to double tap into everything that I wanted to ask. Right. So I have one question around meetings. Yeah. Okay. And then we're going to jump into Working Genius. You have the book, Death by Meetings. I've restructured my staff meetings many times based off of Death by Meeting, kitchen sink, where you throw everything into one meeting. People are notorious. I have two questions around meetings.
Yeah.
When a company has their clear why, how do they not get lost in it being redundant to talk about and just bypassing it? Where it's just like, it doesn't even matter anymore. They don't even bring it up. They did their workshop. They did all the things. and they're in their staff meeting and they don't even care about that anymore. They don't talk about it. It's not the metric they are worried about. Do you have any input on that? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I come back to one thing. I think it was Samuel Johnson, the writer, who said people need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed. And I think about Jesus. I'm a follower of Jesus. He was constantly reminding people. We human beings forget things and lose sight of things. And so we need to constantly remind ourselves, remember why we exist. Remember our values. We do this, when we have teams do this at meetings, every time they're like, oh yeah, it forms the context of what they're about to talk about. And there's
Do you just go through it though?
You
You just say it.
Literally.
Like you're like, I'm going to say it again, even though it sounds so redundant,
Yeah.
even though I've said it a million times, I'm going to say it again.
Nobody ever left a company because they said, if that CEO reminded me of the values one more time. But people leave companies all the time like they never taught. I have a friend who went to work at a company in medicine, and he went to run IT for them. And he said he left after 6 months. He goes, they never talked about patients or doctors or medicine ever. It was just IT. Everybody wants to work in a company where there's something why it matters, and reminding people of that. The best coaches, the best teachers, the best CEOs are constantly reminding people. And as I like to say, until the people in your organization can do a good impression of you as a leader, you're probably not communicating enough. It's like a parent. If they go, I know, Dad, I'm not supposed to do this. It's like, yep, and I'm going to keep telling you.
Wow.
And at the end of their year, that when they grow up, they're like, I'm so glad you kept telling us that. You're like, you weren't happy when I told you. But we have to be chief reminding officers, and we have to be willing to be teased about it. And that's how we know we're doing it enough.
Okay, so in your pursuit of this, at some point you start to go and say, there's something either happening in the market, happening in yourself, where you start to develop this thing called working genius. Something is going on either in you or the market. What is happening either in the market or in yourself that you developed an assessment called the working genius?
Well, it was in myself.
Okay.
It was a complete accident. Most of my books came about because I'm working with clients or experiencing something myself. I did not think I would write this many books. I thought I'd write one. And then they said, how about another one? And then we said, oh, there's another one. There's 3. And I thought, I'm done. And then we kept learning things. So here's how this one came out, most recent one. I'm literally at work, and I'm doing a Zoom seminar for a bunch of Catholic priests because I was doing this thing. And I love teaching and I love doing that. And I was really excited. But some of the organization of that event didn't go well. And so then after that meeting, I had to get on Zoom with the staff and tell them why they needed to get better. And I hated that. I was really bummed out. And then right after that, I had a meeting to come up with a new podcast idea. And I was really excited. And the woman that was with me, Amy, said, why are you like that? I said, what? And she goes, you get really excited and you get really bummed out and you get really excited. And I realized at that moment, this has been going on for 20 years. I go to work, I'm so excited to be there, and something will happen and I'll be suddenly like kind of frustrated. And I never knew why. I thought, maybe there's just something wrong with me. Is this a manic thing? But it wasn't. That day I sat down and I said, what am I doing when I get frustrated? What am I doing when I'm fully alive? And how does that happen? And in the course of doing that, thanks be to God, we discovered that there's actually 6 kinds of work that are required in any activity. Producing a podcast, starting a company, building a house, planning a vacation. Any kind of group activity requires 6 different skills. And you should spend most of your time doing the ones that give you joy and energy. And if you're called on to constantly do things that deprive you of joy and energy, you are going to get burned out. And for 20 years, I was doing something called galvanizing, which I didn't love. And every day I'd come to work excited to do the things I loved. And they'd go, galvanize, galvanize, galvanize. They didn't know they were. And I was being asked every day to do the thing that was draining me.
And so then in that, you started to develop an assessment. You immediately were like, let's make an assessment on this. You're like, you know what? I got this thing that they're asking me to do and I don't like it. Let's make an assessment.
No, I thought I was just solving my own problem.
Okay.
So we literally, it was in the whiteboard in my office the first day. We were on a Zoom call with one of our consultants and we showed it to him. We said, hey, look at this thing. There's 6 kinds of work and I don't like this. And this is what burns me out. The next day he was on with the CEO of this food company in Oregon, I remember. And the CEO was frustrated and he showed him the thing. And the guy literally teared up.
Wow.
And said, this is why I'm so unhappy. And the consultant called us. And then I had it in my house on the whiteboard. So my wife was using it. My kids were using it. Their friends were doing it. We were doing it at work. And we realized it was universal. It wasn't just for me. It wasn't just for this guy. These 6 kinds of things. And we kept evolving them and pushing on them. And then we said, if everybody could figure out what their geniuses are, they're the 2 of the 6 that give them joy and energy, and everybody could figure out what their frustrations were, the 2 of the 6 that robbed them of joy and energy, the world would be different. And teams would be different. And people would feel different. My wife would be happier when she read my book.
Which is an accomplishment. My wife doesn't read anything.
No. This was like the 3rd one that she read before it came out. I said, "What'd you think?" And she goes, "It was great, and I'm pissed."
Wow.
And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I've been working outside of my genius for so long, and I didn't know it, and I felt like a failure." So many people have said to us, "I thought I was an imposter, or I thought I was a failure, and I didn't know why." When I first got out of college, I got a job that was supposed to be literally the best job in America. There was a list that created that year, and this company and this role that I had, I got the best job in America. Everybody's like, "You're set for life." 30 years later, I now realize that it was a job that was requiring of me the 2 things I hated the most. So I spent 2 years there grinding. I didn't succeed wildly. Up until that point in my life, I had been really successful, and I thought, well, here it is. I'm an imposter. I failed. And it wasn't until I did Working Genius that I realized, I was destined to fail. And if I could go back, I'd have said, this is a great job, but not for me. And so many people are pursuing things that aren't really for them, and they don't know why.
Okay, there's 2 paths in my brain right now going like just a million miles an hour, which is not uncommon for me, but it's 2 paths. Relate. One path goes down. I want to know what I want us to go through what those working geniuses are. The other path in my brain goes, well, that's nice to be able to change your job when your geniuses don't work and you're just going to go and do a different job. I know people who are like, I got to make money. What am I going to do when these guys telling me to go find my genius and I found it and my job's like, I could care less what you think you're a genius at because you still got to go do X, Y, and Z.
And let's do that one.
Okay.
The beauty of this, it's not about changing jobs. Like, it's about telling the people around you, your boss and your colleagues, like, hey, these are my geniuses. And it's about using them within the job you already have. So it's not that I have to change careers. This is not a career thing. It's literally, and I like to say, like, if you were to hire somebody to run marketing at your company, you should ask yourself, well, what kind of job is that? Just because one person likes marketing, another person likes marketing, and they could be totally different things. So what do you need in that job? Well, similarly, people can have a job and say, I'm a youth minister. But what kind of youth minister? Are you a come up with new ideas youth minister? Are you the church already has a program and I'm going to run it really well? Is it I have to make decisions? There's so many different ways to do the same job. And so companies want their people to use their gifts. So it's not about getting out of that role. But sometimes they can just adjust it really quickly without changing your job description. It's like, hey, you love doing this. You don't love doing this. We're on the same team. This is a win-win. I'm going to let you do part of their work and you can do part of their work and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And you do better work. The customers are happy. It's crazy. But I love this story. A guy called us and said that he had a performance review and it had not been a good year. And so he was about to go in and find that out. I mean, he knew that they were going to tell him that. So he was going in to meet with his boss and his boss's boss. The night before, he took Working Genius and he looked at the report and he said, okay. He goes into the thing and he gives it to him and he goes, before we get started, can you look at this? And they were reading it and they said, well, no wonder you haven't done well this year. Your job, this is a terrible job for you. He goes, I know. And they said, we have another job in the organization that you'd be perfect for. And instead of sitting there and telling him why he failed, they said, we're putting you in that. He said, I got promoted instead of demoted because they understood what I was great at. Every good manager wants to put their people in a position to succeed. And usually you can do that within their current role. It's just rethinking how it happens.
Pat, oh my gosh.
I know, isn't it?
I'm on the edge of tears myself. Like, just knowing this whole journey, I myself went through like 15 years in one industry working in that and wanting to pivot and change and going into the space of brand work and the creative space. I took the Working Genius before that pivot happened, but I took it and I used it as a guide for where I would go next. I started to go, okay, if the job doesn't have this, this, and this, and wants this, this, and this, I won't be a good fit. I'll have to betray myself over and over and over again, and it's going to be bad for them and bad for me. So I use this as a way to guide myself through career changes, actually.
And I think when anybody looks at hiring or getting hired, they should be looking at this.
Yeah.
And there was a lawyer I worked with years ago who actually said he was the reason why it was illegal to use assessments in hiring. There was the Supreme Court of Texas had a case where somebody sued because they were doing this, and he represented those people and he won. And he goes, I'm the reason why you can't use assessments in hiring. I used the assessment with his team building, and at the end of going through it, he said, this actually works. I suddenly understand that you're successful in your job because of this, and I like it. And so what we say to companies is this: acquaint people with it, know what you're looking for in that job. So you can say, we're looking for a head of marketing, but we're looking for one that's really creative and likes to come up with these new things. We don't have a lot of systems, so we want you to come up with those. And the other person might say, well, I'm a very successful head of marketing, but I've always worked at companies where I was really executing a plan and helping sales close leads. And they're like, thank you for not putting me in a job I would fail in. Thank you for not wasting 6 months of our lives and our time. So it's not about judging people. It's about understanding them and finding the right fit.
Gosh. Okay. So we're going to, the next path we're going to take on is you describing what are those 6 geniuses. Then from there, I want you to, you've actually initially said that the Working Genius was first this productivity tool, but it's morphed and changed and it's adapted. We'll get into that in the second half by even reviewing my wife and I's
I love it.
Working Genius. But what I want you to do is go through each Working Genius. And if you want, just because I'm a nerd and I read all this stuff and I just spend hours on this stuff, if you want to break that down to how the stages of work, I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't complain.
Everything, I try to go fast.
Okay.
So I'm going to do the 6 types of Working Genius in the order that they come in, like theoretically in how work happens. And I'm going to do it in altitude from the very top, like your head in the clouds at 50,000 feet to your feet on the ground at 5 feet. And so the first Working Genius, and the most mysterious one of all, is the first one that happens in any endeavor, and it's called wonder. And the genius of wonder, the W, is the genius of just looking at things around you and asking good questions. And people that have this literally say, I wonder a lot. Like, I wonder why we do it this way. I wonder if customers want something more. I wonder if this brand is no longer applicable. I wonder if there's a better way to do something. They don't have an answer, but they ask the question, and every new idea, every company, every business, everything happens by somebody wondering. The problem is wanderers have been told all their lives to stop wondering, certainly in school. They're like, what are you doing? He's in his head all the time. Yeah, he's wondering. He's asking questions. Just do the paper and turn it in on time. People with the genius of wonder have never usually been really acknowledged for it. And this is one of the best things to come out of this. It's like, no, this is a genius. In fact, we need it. My wife has W. 3 of my sons have W. I never got it. And then we finally realized it's a genius. Now, wonder is not enough. None of these are enough. So that wanderer asks the great question, and that comes to the next genius, a little lower in the clouds, and that's invention. The wanderer asks the question, and the inventor, I have invention as a genius, says, oh, I love this part. I get to actually try to solve that problem. I get to come out of almost nothing to help with that. So when somebody comes to me and says, I have a problem and I need an idea, a solution, I'm like alive. And I'm like, let me try. And that's why then I'll come up with a book or a product or an idea or a new principle. I can't help it. And I like to say, it's a genius when you get joy and energy from it, and you're likely to try to do it even when people don't want you to. Because sometimes my wife is like, I don't need your eye right now, but I like my eye. And she goes, so do I, but not right now. Okay. So the first 2, wonder and invention, are that's where ideation. That's ideation. Now we move a little bit further. I come up with an idea, but somebody has to evaluate it. Somebody has to look at it and say, does this resonate? And this is discernment. Discernment is pattern recognition, gut feel, instinct, seeing connections between things. And it's people that have great judgment that they can't prove on a spreadsheet. And in organizations, this is so important. It's that person you turn to and you go, what is your gut telling you? Because their gut is almost always right. That's discernment. So my editor, when I write books, it has discernment. And she'll just read a chapter and go, this character doesn't make sense to me. And I don't go, prove it to me. I'm like, if she thinks that, she's right. I listen. I trust her discernment. So it goes wonder, invention, discernment. Once you've discerned the idea and gone back and forth and you're like, it's ready to go, then you need the one I don't have, which is galvanizing. That's the G. That's the person who goes, you guys are ready with this idea? I'm going to go get everybody excited. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to inspire people. I'm going to push them. I'm going to tell them to stop what they're doing. We got a great idea. They're inspirers, motivators, pushers, marketers, salespeople. They literally get joy and energy convincing people to do things that they might not want to do, which is so many people's least favorite thing in the world, which is so crazy because one man's trash or woman's is another man's treasure. The very things we don't like, somebody else loves. And when a team does that and figures that out, everybody gets better. So the galvanizer galvanizes everybody. The D and the G, the discernment and galvanizing, we call activating. That's taking the idea and activating it. The last two are implementation. And the first stage of implementation is the person with the genius of E, enablement. They are the ones that when you say, I need your help, their first reaction naturally, joyfully is, what do you need from me? I want to help you. Sometimes you go to the hospital and you wonder, how does that nurse answer the bell and just come into the room happy? There are people that God gave a desire to come alongside and help. And they literally get joy and energy from something that another person would go, that would ruin me. They come alive. And every organization needs it. I was with an organization yesterday that had almost no enablement. And what happens in those organizations is everybody has great ideas and nobody wants to help. And they're like, is anybody going to answer the call? I'm like, no, I have my own thing over here. The people with E are like the glue in an organization that say, I will do it. They come alongside, they volunteer, and they support. The last part, though, the last one, now we're on the ground, 5 feet down, we're landing the plane. And that is the genius of tenacity, the T. These are people that get joy and energy, truly, and I have no understanding of this because I have none of this, out of finishing things. They're like, I don't rest. I don't smile. I don't breathe well until it's finished. I love the act of taking it through to the end. So people say, well, Pat, you must have a lot of tenacity. You've written 13 or 14 books. And I'm like, oh, I'd have finished none of them if people with more tenacity hadn't been around me. Because I lose interest after I'm halfway through and I'm thinking about the next book. And they're like, no. Lovingly, they're like, no, get in there and keep going. And then I'll finish it poorly. And they go, nope. See, I would never do that on my own. So tenacity is the end. So it goes, I wonder about this. I'll invent an idea. I'll discern that idea. We'll galvanize people around that. I'll help. I'll volunteer to help. And then I will make sure it gets done. Nobody has all six. Nobody. And every job, every project needs all six. And here's the bottom line, though, Chris. When people don't understand their working geniuses, they feel guilty about the things they're bad at, and they judge other people about the things that they're not good at, and it tears apart friendship and teamwork. Wow. And suddenly, when you realize your geniuses and their geniuses and your frustrations and their frustrations, you actually are celebrating that. And celebrating even your own frustrations. Yeah. It's such a great thing for me to be able to say, I suck at finishing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I'm a bad person. Yeah. And I need help. Now, that's not an excuse.
Right.
Sometimes I got to finish stuff.
Yeah, that's what we were going to go to. I'm like, I was speechless for the last 10 minutes because I'm like, this is fantastic. And it's like, I think I've said fantastic more on this podcast than anything I've ever said, because this is the stuff when I'm not in the space of thinking creatively about projects or the brands we're working on, the things we're doing, I've told people, even on our team, I've told them, I said, hey, I know we're doing all this creative work. I said, but for me, I'm testing an hypothesis for myself, which was, can I reinvent work and make it meaningful and have it be a path for human flourishing for people? And this company that we're building is my test case.
That's fantastic.
Can we do this? Can we do creative work that works with these brands? But then in and of itself, the product is this company. Can we do this? And this stuff makes that happen.
And so often we talk about meaning and work and we think about the industry we're in or the big thing. And that's important.
Yeah.
But even if you're doing something that's changing the world, but the work you're doing to make it happen, it's killing you. Yeah. You're like, well, but I'm feeding the hungry, but I'm doing the wrong job.
Yes. Yes.
And so what we believe is that when people realize they're geniuses, they actually find the right seat on the bus.
Yep.
Jim Collins talks about getting the people and we have a book called The Ideal Team Player, which is like humble, hungry, smart. If you have a team, get those people. But then you get them in and you're like, are they in the right seat? And so that's what Working Genius is about, is finding the right seat. And that's what makes work fulfilling. Now, there's so many days. And as a dad of 4 sons, I had to do a lot of T work, tenacity. Nobody could go, I have a new idea about changing a diaper. It's like, no, finish changing it. It's halfway done. Somebody else will finish it. No, they won't. You will.
Tyler's running around bare bum.
But and here's the interesting thing about parenting. My wife felt like a failure for years.
Wow.
And I remember we didn't have the Working Genius, and I would say to her, why don't you find somebody else who loves doing this part of running the household?
Yeah.
And she'd say, but my friends love it. So there's something wrong with me that I don't. And the thing is, they had different Working Geniuses.
Right.
Not all moms love scheduling, carpool, and paying the bills.
Yeah.
Not all moms love sitting down and
they feel this obligation. My wife and I have talked so much about this because especially in faith circles, you can get these stereotypes that will go, this is what you are, what you should be like. And if you're doing this, that means you're doing it right. And so then so many people don't measure up to that and they wrestle. Me and my wife have had many conversations about this.
Every parent feels guilty about the things they're not good at.
Yeah.
I cannot hang a picture on a wall or mow a lawn. I'm just terrible at that.
Yeah.
But I could organize a youth group.
Yeah.
And I can do other things and help my kids with homework. And certain homework I love helping them with.
Yeah.
Others I don't.
Yeah.
And it's like we feel guilty for the things we can't do. God didn't make any of us to do it alone. We need others. And when you're married and it's just 2 of you, you never cover all 6 geniuses. So you should know which ones you don't cover, know that going in and saying, we're either going to need to accept the fact that we're not great at that part of it or find people that can help us do that.
Okay. So that's a great segue into the next part of this. So I'm going to ask you this question from a brand perspective and you leading your company and how this has impacted your company. And then you're going to give me my own personal time here with you, with everybody in the room. And you're going to go through my Working Genius and help me. So you launched this as a productivity tool. I remember listening to the first podcast. I've been in it since the start. This is a productivity tool. It is starting to pivot to a different type of tool.
Yes.
As someone leading a company, building a brand around something, what is happening and how is that ruffling feathers or not? Like, how are you speaking to that? Product is pivoting.
Well, here's what we mean by that.
Okay.
It definitely is a productivity tool, but first and foremost, it is a personal revelation tool. See, we worked with companies. We were in the business world and we were helping organizations. And everything up until this point had primarily an organizational application. When this came out, we were like, hey, what a great... So we were just, you work in a bakery, you come up with something, you sell it in a bakery. Well, maybe that belongs someplace else. And you don't realize that because you've only been baking. So I realized a couple years into this is that, wait a second, this isn't first a tool for teams. It's first a tool for people to feel less guilt and less self-condemnation and more appreciation for others and for themselves. And that once they get that and start to apply it to others around them, then it goes to the workplace.
Wow.
You don't start in the workplace. It's everybody that's doing this is like, I want to understand myself. And even though that definitely leads to teams are transformed by it, it doesn't start there. And we are learning to help people understand it's enough just for you to get it on your own. And apply it not only at work, but in your home, anywhere you do things.
Yeah.
We could have called it the 6 types of doing genius, but we work at home.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about you and your wife. Think about this. Most of what you do in your marriage is work.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, you're like, who's picking the kids up? How are we doing this? Well, what are we going to do?
Organizing that. Where are we going? How long ahead are we thinking? What's happening in the next 3 months that we need to think about? How are we organizing our lives around that? You've got a baby coming. What, like all those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if we don't break that down in terms of what are we good at, what are we not good at, we're going to inevitably feel guilty for whatever we're not good at.
Okay. So one last question in that. Has that been hard for your team to look at a product pivot, or has everybody been like, we recognize it, it's changing, and we're good with that?
It's taken us about 6 months.
6 months, okay.
Because it's a new thing for us.
All right.
It's a new thing for us. And I in this case, I'm often wrong, and other people are telling me, I think I had this realization first for whatever reason. And they're like, but we're a business company.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, but this is a personal development tool. And like, yeah, but we're a business company. And it took us a while. because that was not our muscle memory.
Did you think you were going to maybe start a different company for just this, or?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because we've always known this could be its own company. Where was I just the other day? I was on a podcast.
Okay.
And at the end of the podcast, we started talking about Working Genius. And the cameraman, after it was over, goes, "Oh, I didn't know you're the Working Genius guy." We were talking about organizational health and all this. And he goes, "Oh, yeah." And then everybody from the company came out and said, "Look at our Working Geniuses." They didn't even know we did that.
Love it.
So it has been a new thing for us.
Yeah.
And we think probably there's, 1.5 million people almost have taken this.
I was going to say, it's resonating. Over 1 million people have taken this thing.
And so a lot of people know Working Genius, and then they'll find out later, like, oh, is that the same people that did the 5 dysfunctions of a team?
Interesting.
So that's where our branding is coming in.
Okay.
We're kind of combining those together.
Gotcha. All right. So we're going to geek out for me. So everybody on the podcast, if you don't care about this, you can jump off. But if you want to see it in real time.
Oh, yeah. This is so fun. And I don't know what this is.
No, you don't.
I'm going to look at this for the first time.
First time. This is my wife and I. So my wife's going to get a kick out of this. She might actually listen to the podcast now. But these are our two. This is my wife and this is me.
Okay.
So you can say them out loud so people understand.
Chris is your geniuses are IG.
Yes.
Invention and galvanizing. We call that the evangelistic ideator.
Okay.
You're the person who comes up with new ideas and loves to sell them. You're loved like, let's go. You get excited and you want to motivate people to do something about it. And I know, and the people that know you, like, oh my gosh. And that's what I love about this. It takes 12 minutes to take this assessment.
Which is shocking, by the way.
And you get the results back and you're like, and then you show it to other people and they laugh. And they go, you totally do this.
Yes.
And your working frustrations are ENT, the same as mine.
Okay.
Which is, and see, this is important to understand. You don't naturally like to respond to whatever people are asking of you and to finish.
No.
Now, you're a very generous person. You're very enthusiastic. But if it's not an inventive thing that you can get them going, that's how you serve people. It's when somebody says, will you help me with something? And it doesn't fit what you're great at. You're like, I don't really want to. That doesn't mean you're not unkind. It just means that's your genius.
Yeah.
Your
my wife, Alana. Yep.
Your wife is a DW or a WD.
Yeah.
This is the contemplative counselor. What they are, they listen, they take things in, and they have amazing insights. So let me just predict
something. It feels psychic.
I know, and it's not. It's not. Believe you me. I don't do that.
Yeah.
So here's the crazy thing, and I do this with people, and they're like, how do you know? And it's like, because it makes sense. And by the way, your wife's working frustrations are your geniuses.
Yes.
So, and literally this, imagine you and her get a new job and you come, and it's the exact same job, and you come home and go, I just got the job of a lifetime.
Yeah.
They just want me to come up with new ideas and get people to change what they're doing. And your wife would go, I just got the world's worst job. I have to come up with new ideas and get people to do something they're not doing. I mean, your treasure is her trash. And in a marriage, that can either be annoying or it can be, oh, I'm so glad you love doing the things I don't like.
Yeah. I don't know how much of that happens, but hey.
Well, it takes a while.
It takes a while.
So, but her geniuses fit yours perfectly, and it's going to annoy the crap out of you. Mm-hmm. At first, I mean, it could. And I've had this with people. I know people with almost the same combo. And the husband goes like this. We had a guy with a very similar thing who wrote to us right after Working Genius came out and said, you don't know how this changed my life. Wow. He said, I used to think my wife didn't like me. He goes, I mean it. I know that sounds silly, but I kind of thought she didn't like me. And on Valentine's Day, we did the Working Genius. And and here's why. He was an IG. He came with new ideas, was so excited. She was a WD like you, like your wife. And she would always give him like, well, honey, but this is why that might not work. And he would go, why are you crushing my dreams? And she's like, I'm loving you. When they figured this out, she goes, see, I was loving you because I don't want you to drive a car off a cliff. I just want to give you feedback that'll make your idea better. And he was like, but you keep telling it's not going to work. And she's like, but I see things that you don't see. And they literally, he said, we discovered that she loved me in a way I didn't understand. And I thought she was against me, but she's for me.
So tell me, okay. So Pat, now the marriage counseling part of your job. So, okay. And if I needed to tie this in for people listening to the podcast, when you're a healthy individual, it impacts all of the areas of your life. You cannot keep things in a box.
No.
So it all impacts. So the way I do my marriage, as we know, at the Coldplay concert. We all see how that plays out when CEOs don't live with integrity and value in their life. We know how those things play out. So these things do matter in your behind the scenes when you're not running your brand at the face. Tell me more about my wife. What is the DW like? Tell me more about the contemplative counselor.
They are so insightful, but not like really fast to say no. But they see, so you're going to come on and go, got this new idea. Okay, we're going to do this thing. Here's how much it's going to cost. I can see it right now. We'll do this, and here's how it, and it's going to change some things in our family. And she's going to be contemplating them and noticing subtle insights. And she's going to be like, oh, wait a second. And you're going to be like, oh, but it's exciting. Mm-hmm. And she's seeing, it's not a no, it's a, but what about this? Mm-hmm. And what about this? Mm-hmm. And so what's great is what you can do is go, hey, honey, I have this great idea. And I'm really excited. I have a whole plan, but I need your discernment. Yeah. Because I probably am missing something. Mm-hmm. We tell IGs, it's like, have a partner who's a discerner, because that's what's in between. You know, invention goes to discernment before it goes to galvanizing. Yeah. And you're going to say, I want that. And she's going to go, you want that from me? Mm-hmm. So I have discernment. My wife doesn't. When she comes to me and says, I need your discernment, I'm like, oh, this is great, because I love doing it. Yeah. And she's recognizing that I have a gift. Yeah. And I say to her, I need your wonder about this.
And that's the one that I think when you say wonder, when you started articulating when a person has wonder, whether it's in work or at home, why are we doing it this way? Like, that is my wife, like, yes, through and through. Like, she will challenge conventional norms, not even realizing she's challenging such deeply seated conventions that she's like, why do women have to do? And I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going for the ride. And so she will then just unpack all of these things she's been thinking about, going, this is why that doesn't work. This doesn't work. And this doesn't work because I've been asking this question about this. And I'm like, okay, whoa.
Now, you know what's awesome? So my son is a WD who I work with. And we'll go into a meeting and I'm an I and I'll come up with an idea. And he'll say, that's not a good idea. And I will go, and you're like, and I'll go, well, what do you think? He goes, I don't know. I don't have I'm a WD. And literally he's like, I'm just telling you, I can see that this and this and this isn't right. I wish I could give you a better one, but that's not me. And that's the beauty of this model is like,
I love that so
people
much.
Should use these words. And so my wife has said something to me one time and I'll get frustrated and I'll go, wait, are you Wing? And she goes, yeah, I'm just Wing. I'm like, oh, okay.
So you're like calling it even in the work, and is your team doing that too? Like,
we do it all the time. I say to people at work, hey, I'm eyeing you. I'm throwing out an idea. Mm-hmm. I'm not G'ing you, which is trying to get you to do it. Because sometimes I'll come to work.
You talked about this with Cody in your one of your recent podcasts about the idea that because you're the boss, people will naturally
think I'm galvanizing.
Yes. Which I think is my problem.
Right.
Because I am a galvanizer. So when I have an idea, everybody's like, this must be it. Where I'm like, well, kind of like, I'm not quite sure if it's it, but I'm like, it's a good idea.
So what we need to do sometimes is separate our geniuses and say, right now I'm eyeing you, I'm not G'ing you. Mm-hmm. So don't run off and figure out how to implement this. I actually am looking for your discernment.
Love it.
And so it's Lana's going to go, oh, so you understand that I do have good judgment. Because here's the pain in the butt about Lana. Her questions are really good.
Yeah.
WDs ask really good questions.
Yeah. I'm like, she's currently training for equine therapy where she's like, and it's just like the amount of questions she asks or the question she asks of herself. I'm like, I would never, okay. Yeah. All right, let's go. So it's true. I love this so much. That's Pat, cool. This is super insightful from a company standpoint, from an individual wholeness standpoint. All of these things. Now, let me wrap us up with one final thought.
This is a blast for me.
Yes, because I'm like geeking out still over here. If you had to start everything over, if you were like, all right, I've got to rebuild the table group, knowing all the things you know, would you focus on Working Genius as like a potential like hiring process? What would you do if you were starting over with the table group right now?
And of course, that's always a dangerous thing to do because you want to thank God for the path He put you on. But like from a theoretical, intellectual standpoint, the first thing I would do would probably be write the book The Motive, which is about why leaders should or should not be a leader. Because so many people, I want to start with that and say, is this for others or is this for you? Because if you get it wrong, stop. And then I would probably do this and say, I want everyone, including leaders, to understand themselves and understand the people they lead. And the motive works for home as well. It's like, why are you a parent?
Yeah.
Are you doing it for your kids or are you doing it for you?
Yeah.
And so I would probably do those first. My last 2 books were the first ones I should do.
Wow.
But that's kind of how it goes, because we're peeling the onion and we're
yeah.
getting to the middle. And then after that, I don't know. It's such an interesting question. I'm doing some new work right now that I think will be more foundational than all of this, which is just about how human beings, leaders, but anybody can better understand themselves so they can actually take the first step toward personal development and understand how to do that. Because I think most people are like, I know things aren't right, but I don't know what to start with. And so that's my next thing.
I love it. And the motive, Working Genius, all of these things are, the great part is all these things are available right now. Like people can actively engage with this at any stage of their company. And when they're building their brand, if you're thinking only on the creative front and you don't think about these elements, I think you're amiss. I honestly do. I think you're on the wrong track. I think you're going to make something that's really beautiful and has great potential impact, but I think you can run people over again and again and just have not high retention. Your culture becomes toxic.
Yeah.
Without this stuff, I think your brand will fizzle.
I think one of the things at the heart of this is when you understand yourself and the gifts God gave you, and you understand the ones you don't have, which is okay too, you can be more, gets back to what we talked about earlier, more vulnerable, more comfortable with who you are, better able to celebrate others, better able to look at things. So I think it's actually a great trust building tool on a team and in a family with a wife and a husband. Can you imagine saying, oh, you do appreciate the things I'm good at.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't feel bad for the things I'm not good at.
So real quick here, what problem is the Working Genius actually solving? Like what is the thing you're thinking like, this is going to solve this problem in work or at home, whatever? What is that problem?
The biggest thing is it allows us to avoid unnecessary guilt and frustration and unnecessary judgment of others because we don't understand our gifts and those of others. But the most practical thing that happens when we don't understand our working genius is that we experience burnout.
How would you define burnout?
See, here's the thing. People have been defining it wrong. And I know this because I've been through it myself. We think, hey, that person's burnt out. They need a vacation. They need time off. And sometimes people are just, they do. But most times that's not the right answer. In fact, most people that are burnt out, if you tell them, hey, just take a few days off, they're like, I don't think that's the solution. What we really have to do is realize this. We get burned out because we're doing work that drains us of our joy and energy. See, it's about joy and energy. That's your working genius. When people say, I don't know what, we just ask them the question, well, what brings you alive when you're doing it? And most people know that. And so when you get joy and energy out of doing something, you don't get burned out. You can come home from work. I came home from work recently and it was like 12 hours. And my wife said, you seem really energized. And I'm like, I was doing the stuff I love. I can go home after 4 hours of doing the stuff that drains me and feel burnt out. So oftentimes we think burnout is the amount of work. It's actually the nature of the work you're doing. And the best way to understand joy and energy is to think about this analogy we use around coffee cups. Okay, so your working genius, when it comes to energy, is like pouring coffee into like a Yeti mug where you screw the lid on and it'll stay hot all day. You're always like, how does that work? And that's your genius. You can just do it and you keep your energy and your joy. Your working competency, which is your next two, it's neither your genius nor your frustration, is that Starbucks cup you get and you pour coffee into it, put a plastic lid on it, and it's going to stay warm for a while. Your working frustration is the coffee cup that you pour coffee into and there's a little hole in the bottom and it just starts leaking right through. And so burnout comes down to, are you actually doing the kind of thing where you're just losing your joy and energy right away? Is it the kind of stuff you can do for a while, or are you doing the stuff that the energy just holds? And so that's how burnout relates to joy and energy, and how if we don't know what our working geniuses and frustrations are, it's just a crapshoot.
So you said burnout is something you experienced. That's how you can articulate it. What are you talking about? Did you have any, like what happened that you were going, I'm having burnout, not just a vacation?
Well, and what's amazing,
needing a vacation.
I got burned out doing one of my working competencies in the middle.
Okay.
So I would come to work every day wanting to invent and discern. That's what I do. I'm called the discriminating ideator. I like to come up with new ideas and evaluate them in real time. And I'd come to work every day. I love the people I worked with. I loved what we did. And this is a great example. I was doing something that I thought mattered, and I loved the people I was with. I'd come to work excited. I never felt the Sunday blues. I was always like, Monday is fun. I'd get to work and I'd start working on stuff and somebody would go, hey, we need reminding, we need galvanizing. You have to push them. This is not happening. This is not happening. And for 20 years, I would go to work wanting to do one thing and I was constantly galvanizing. And even though it wasn't even my lowest areas, you can burn out because I was constantly doing something that I was not meant to do all the time. And that's how I realized I didn't need time off. And you know what's funny? What happens now is sometimes people will say, hey, you're really tired, aren't you? You should go home. And I'm like, no. How about if you just give me a project that actually I love?
Wow.
So it's a very different thing. We always think we're telling somebody, hey, just take a vacation. And they're like, no, I actually need to recharge myself, not just have downtime.
Wow. That's fascinating.
You know what this relates to? It relates to retirement too. People think that retirement is like, well, I'll golf and I'll go to the beach every day. And it's like, really, retirement should be, I'm going to spend almost all of my time doing the things that give me joy and energy. And because one man's trash is another man's treasure, they'll say, why in the world are you starting a business in retirement? It's like, are you kidding? This is a party. And somebody else would say, why are you volunteering at the food bank every day in retirement? It's like, because I love that kind of thing. But again, since one person's trash is another person's treasure, only we can decide what's going to be the right thing to do.
Fantastic. Gosh, huge honor for me. Thank you so much, Pat. I love this.
All right, it's been great being here.